So whenever we create a new Vue component like this one here, the nav bar, that component has a lifecycle or journey if you like. And during that lifecycle, we have access to several different functions that fire at different stages through this component's lifecycle. Now, these are called lifecycle hooks, and this lifecycle is excellently explained on the Vue website. So let's go through it together now. So I'll leave this link attached to this lesson so you can check it out in your own time as well. And this diagram here just explains the life cycle of our components. So the first method we have access to, or the first lifecycle hook, is this one right here, before create. So this method fires before the component instance is actually created. So if we wanted to run some code in preparation before the component is actually created, we could add it into this lifecycle hook right here. After this, the component instance observes the data inside that component. So up in the before create hook, we don't have access to that data yet that we define inside our component, so we can't reference it inside that method. But after this fires, the instance observes the data on the component. Then in the next lifecycle hook, created, that is where we can access the data. Now the component has fully been created. So at this point, we have access to our data and the methods on the component, and this is typically a good place to load in any data from an external source. For example, making an AJAX request to an API endpoint to receive some JSON data. And we'll be looking at doing that later on in this course. Now, notice, although this says created, and it has been created, this component has not yet been inserted into the DOM yet. Yeah, Vue has created it and it's ready to be inserted, but it's not yet been inserted. All right. So after this hook right here, Vue does a little internal check-in to see exactly how this component will be rendered to the DOM. And just before it does mount the DOM, it fires this before mount lifecycle hook. So this hook is a good place to do any last minute prep before it mounts the DOM. Then the component does mount the DOM, and at this point we get access to another lifecycle hook called mounted. So in this hook we can now do a little DOM manipulation with the component if we wish. So when it's mounted to the DOM, we also have these two little hooks as well. So imagine we have data stored in our component. If that data changes at any point, the component will update to reflect that change. Now, just before it does update, we get this before update hook. Then it updates to the DOM to reflect the data changes, and then this updated hook is fired when it's done. Finally, when the component is destroyed and removed from the DOM, we get access to these two hooks right here. So before destroy runs just before the component is destroyed, and we can put any kind of code in there we want as well. Destroyed for any kind of final cleanup after the component has been removed. Okay, now, although I say destroyed here, what I mean is we take that component out of the web page, out of the DOM. We're not actually destroying the code that makes that component. We can use it again at a later point in time. We can reinsert it into the DOM, and then it follows the whole life cycle again. Okay, so this life cycle might be a little bit confusing at first, but we will be using several of the different hooks, especially this created one here throughout this series, and you will get to grips with it the more we use it. But to begin with, let's have a look at some of them in action in one of our components. Okay then, so the first thing you'll notice is that I've deleted the all friends and online friends components from the last video. I've also deleted any reference to those inside app.vue, so where they're nested, imported, registered down here, and I've also deleted the friends data and method. We won't be using that anymore. So for this video, what we'll do is create a new component inside the source folder. So new file, we'll call this blogs.vue. And the idea here is that we'll be creating some kind of dummy blog component with some data from elsewhere as we go through the next couple of tutorials. So first of all, let's create a template. Inside here, a div with a class of blogs. And inside that, we'll do a h2. We'll output a dynamic title here in a minute. And I think that will do for now. So let's also do a script tag for our component object. In here we need a name, first of all, which we'll call blogs. Then we need our data function, which returns an empty object, like so. Okay, so let's define a title for this. We'll call it blog title, and this can be just blogs. Nice and original. Okay, so we'll output blog title right here. There is a reason I'm doing this dynamically, and we'll see that later. Okay, so We were talking about lifecycle hooks, and we said that components had access to these different lifecycle hooks, and we could place code in those hooks or functions which can execute at those different points during the component lifecycle. So where do we define those hooks? Well, we just define them on the component themselves. So do a comma after data, and then we'll create some lifecycle hooks. Now remember, these have specific names. If we take a look at this thing again, we can see they're called before create, created, before mount, mounted, etc. So we need to use these exact names. We can't call them different things. So for example, we can create here a hook called before create. This is a function, and then we can write some code in here that is going to fire when this stage in the component lifecycle is reached. So I could just say alert, and then what I'll do is just alert before create hook, just to let us know in the browser that this is the hook that's currently firing. Okay, we'll do another one. We'll say created. This is the lifecycle hook that fires after this thing, after the component observes any kind of data that we've defined. So at this point, we could have access to the data if we wanted to. So I'll say alert, and then it's created hook, so we know. We'll just do that for now. So let's save that and go to the browser and check this out. If I refresh now, we're not going to see anything because obviously I've not nested this component inside the app.vue. So let's do that first of all. We'll need to import it. So we'll say import, and we want blogs from /blogs. We also need to register it down here. So we'll say blogs, and then we'll also place it underneath the navbar like so. Okay. So now we should see this on the screen, and now we can see this alert message. So what I'm going to do is press OK twice. I'm going to refresh as well. So notice we see the blogs there. That's when the component has rendered to the DOM. Now I'm going to refresh the page. So this all loads again. Now notice we see this alert before anything appears on the page. So this before create hook is firing our code before anything has actually been created in Vue. So we can do any kind of preparation in there. Press OK. Now we get the created hook, but we still don't see anything on the screen. Now remember, I said that the created hook means that Vue has created the component, but it's not yet rendered it to the DOM. So it's ready and waiting. It's just not been inserted to the DOM yet. So at this point, we could go out and grab some data from an external source and place it into our component, put it into our template so that when it does render, we see it there on the page. Press OK. Now it appears on the page, this blogs component and the other stuff. All right then, so there's two basic lifecycle hooks. We've seen now before create and created. Let's do one more. What I'd like to do is the before update hook. Now remember, this is going to fire just before our component updates. Now in order for our component to update, we'll have to change the data, because every time the data changes in the component then updates. So to do that, to change the data, we'll do a button up here, and we're going to add a click event to this button. So we'll say @click and set it equal to some kind of function. This function will change the title. So we'll call that function change title, and we'll place some text in here so we know what to do on the browser. Then let's create this function inside our methods property and place a comma after that. And notice this methods property right here, these are all for our custom methods. These lifecycle hooks do not go inside the methods property. They just go into the root of the object itself. Okay. All right then. So inside here, we need a change title method, and this change title method will change this thing right here. So we'll change this .blog title into something cooler. So we'll say amazing blog site. Wow. All right. So now when we click on this button, hopefully we should change the title and it should update the component, and then we should see this thing fire right here. Now this is blinking away because obviously there's an alert box over here, but before we go to the browser, what I'd like to do is alert something here, and we'll alert before update hook. Okay, so let's save that now. So now if we go to the browser, I'm going to refresh first of all, and hopefully let's just get through these. Now we see the before create hook. I want to start this again. Press refresh. So we get the before create hook, first of all. Then we get the created hook. Then we don't get anything. But if we now change the title, we get the before update hook, and notice that this has not updated yet. The title has not yet updated. When we click OK, now it's updated. All right. So there's just an example of some of the different hooks that we can use in the components lifecycle. Like I said, we will be using some of these as we go through this series. So if you're not 100% on them just yet, don't worry. You will pick it up more as we go along.